Okay, so we're here today with Miss Nell from the Chennault Aviation Museum. Did I say that correctly?
Aviation and Military Museum.
Aviation and Military Museum. So, Miss Nell, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and how you got involved with the museum?
Okay. The museum opened in 2000. My mother was General Chennault's daughter.
Okay.
And when they decided, Nita Brinson, the building that the museum is in is one of the last remaining buildings of the largest navigation school in the whole United States in World War II. We graduated 15,000 navigators.
Wow.
And that's something a lot of people, that history that we have, that great history we have here, they don't realize. Well, the building was fixing to be destroyed, and Nita Brinson had been a telephone operator. She was a real estate person here, and very prestigious real estate person that had been here. And she just felt like it would be awful to let that piece of history be destroyed. So she started working with the legislature in the 90s to be able to raise some funds to open a museum about Selman Field, but also General Chennault, who was living here when he passed away. He was raised in Gilbert, living here when he passed away. She called my mother to see if we wanted to do a Chennault room. And of course, my mother immediately called me and said, "What are you going to do?" And so we did a Chennault room there, and we.
What year was this?
This is 2000. We opened in 2000,
Okay.
but I mean, the unfortunate thing about it was about 3 weeks before we opened, Nita Brinson was murdered.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, she hired somebody to mow her yard, work in her yard, and they stabbed her and stole her car. And so, the thing was, what do we do? And we said, we've got to open. That's what she would want us to do. So we opened in 2000, just on the weekends, and all volunteer, no paid jobs whatsoever. I had another career as a nurse in another life, and was working full time. So we did the weekends, and we started and we opened with just 3,000 square feet.
Okay, what did the museum look like? So 3,000 square feet, what type of stuff? Because obviously it's much larger now than when you started. Give us kind of an overview of kind of what you started with.
Okay, so if you've ridden by the museum, you notice it's in the shape of an H.
Right.
Which is weird, but there's a reason for that during World War II, why they made it that way. So we opened with the 3,000 square feet that's right on Kansas Lane.
Okay.
That section that goes long ways. And it was mainly about Selman Field. We were still having Selman Field reunions because there were a lot of the Selman Field people still around. And they had Selman Field reunions there. And then we had, like I said, the Chennault room. And then we had the history of Delta Airlines, which originated here in Monroe.
Correct.
So basically that's what it was. But it was really interesting because when we first opened, we didn't have a lot. And we even heard things like, that museum will never last. Who's interested in old World War II stuff? And we heard a lot of things like that, a lot of naysayers. Well, after we were open for about 3 years, people realized that we were there to stay. We did fundraisers to try to keep it open. We charged minimal, like $3 for people to come in on the weekends. And then we were able to work with the school board owns the building, and we were able to work with them and get the other 7,000 square feet of that building. And it was in terrible, terrible shape. We had no money, so fortunately we were able to use the prisoners at OCC to be able to come help us do the construction work, to be able to remodel the building. And then in 2005, we realized we needed more help, and so we went under the umbrella of the Secretary of State's office.
Okay.
And the Secretary, there's 2 museum systems in the state of Louisiana. One is under the Lieutenant Governor, which they had the larger museums, and then the Secretary of State's had more the homegrown small community museums. They ended up with 17 eventually. So we went under the umbrella of the Secretary of State, and we were able to hire a director. So we were able to be open full-time with that 3,000 square feet. And then we started working on the other 7,000 manual labor, mainly on the weekends. We fed the prisoners. They would bring them out, and we would give them dinner and cook some good things for them. So it was a win-win. They got out, and we were able to get the construction work done. And then in 2007 is when we opened with the other 7,000. So we have basically, it's a little under 10,000 square feet, maybe 9,000 and change. But things just started pouring out of people's closets.
Okay, that was going to ask that. So when you basically exploded to that much more square footage. Where did you get the artifacts from?
Well, I think people, number one, realized that we were here to stay and that we really did want to do things right. And the interesting thing is the Selman Field Navigation School during World War II graduated 15,000 navigators, which is really unbelievable if you can see the picture of what it looked like, the whole base area, which we have at the museum. And of those 15,000 navigators that we graduated, a lot of them met cute Southern girls when they came to school.
Right.
And so when the war was over, they came back and married those cute Southern girls and populated our community for a long time. So we had a really strong veteran community at the time. And it just, after about 3 or 4 years, stuff just started pouring out of their closets.
Wow.
Number one, they were getting older. They realized their families would not necessarily really respect and honor the things that they had, their treasures, which were treasures. And they started bringing them to the museum, or they were afraid their families, when they were gone, would sell them on eBay or whatever.
What is it like to receive artifacts from a service member or a family member that actually lived it? I mean, it's got to be a humbling experience to
Very
be
much
able
so.
to just. I mean, I'm sure that some things are more valuable to others, or the quality of the content is higher. But every piece that meant something to somebody, it has to be an emotional experience for them.
It
to know
is.
that it's going to be there for generations to come.
Yeah, and in the beginning it worked out really well because just about everything we took in, we didn't, we needed things to fill the cabinets.
Sure.
So we were able to display almost anything that came in. And you're right. I mean, there are people that bring us things. It's kind of two different ones. They bring us things because they really want to honor their service. And then we have those who their family member maybe has passed away. They don't want to throw it away,
Sure.
which some people do, unfortunately, but they don't know what to do with it.
Right.
So they bring it to us. And, studying history and having historians there, it means a lot to us to be able to receive these things that were an important piece of history and an important tool used to win a war.
Sure.
So, and then we started getting more than what we knew what to do with eventually. But in 2007, we had enough to open the door, open to the 10,000 square feet, and we had the director there. Unfortunately, and I was on the state board. We had a state board in conjunction with the Secretary of State and a volunteer during that time.
So did the state board, when you fell underneath the Secretary of State, did they set a budget up at that moment that
They did.
you could operate within?
No. Well, we operated with it, but it took additional funds.
Sure.
Their contribution yearly was around $100,000. Our yearly budget's around $250,000. So we depended on memberships and donations and things like that to be able to continue to keep the doors open. And under the Secretary of State, Jay Darden was the Secretary of State at that time, and he did a study of these small community museums. And in that study, he was aware of the fact that you really, especially in a community that is underserved, like Monroe is, that really the entrance fee, the $3, really didn't make or break. So he decided then that all of his museums would be open for free.
Okay.
And that became really something that I have fought very hard to continue after I took over. For a lot of reasons, but then I'll get to that in a minute. So the director that we had didn't work real well with the Friends Board, which was the original board of directors, and the ones who were the reason for the museum.
Right.
It did not work out. And like I said, I had another career, but I was a nurse and working for an OBGYN doctor. He decided to retire. And Secretary of State Jay Darden called me one day and said, "How would you like to be the director?" Well, I said, I thought it would be an easy job, John. I mean, I just thought, that sounds like something. And I'd already told my husband I wish I had more time to volunteer at the museum.
Right.
Well, so I took the job. And I never realized what the job would entail. So for the next 8 years, I worked 7 days a week.
Wow.
It was incredible, crazy time because to earn, raise funds enough to keep the doors open and to realize the importance of what we were doing and to, and the more veterans, like you said, that came in and their families that told those stories, the more they became personal to me. And so sometimes I would get tired and I'd walk back there and I'd read the story of service that these men had done, and I realized they didn't get tired.
Yeah.
You know, they fought for our country. They're the reason that we can decide whether we go home or get tired or whatever. And it just became so important, and we were able to start establishing some of the veterans programs that we have. So I took over as director in 2008, and we continued along pretty good. The Secretary of State, like I said, still contributing their $100,000 a year. And then in 2015, it was kind of a recession time for our country, our state. The Secretary of State was Tom Shedler by then. And he decided he needed to do away with some museums that he had under his control because he's in charge of voting and other things like that. So he felt like we had a really strong Friends board there, and he just decided that we would be one of the ones he would mark off the list to support. So we had to make up for that $100,000 deficit.
How much notice did the museum have to be able to
Probably about
prepare?
3 months.
Wow.
Yeah, about 3 months. So
That's got to be tough. I mean, when you get half or almost half of your budget or your income taken away,
it was so scary.
it's like, what are we going to do at this point? But it's very obvious y'all found a path forward because, wow, look at where you've come from.
I know. Well, Judge Elvis Stout, who was a prominent judge here in the area, he was retired judge. He's older than I am, actually. So he came to me and he said, "Nell, I want to help you out. I've got some time." So Judge came on board in 2015, and and he's still there. He is a tremendous help with his legal background, and there's a lot of legalities that you get into with artifacts and people's mementos and things like that. So Judge and I were the only two full-time then. We had a couple of part-time people and some really valuable volunteers. So, yeah, it just, there were some months I go in there and I would say, "Judge, we've got about 3 months to stay open here until we get some more money." So it was some pretty rough times. But the community stepped up. That was our plea.
So tell me a little bit about how the community stepped up, because it's I remember when the community first started talking. I couldn't name the year, but it was early 2000s about the museum. And it was just this white building that you would pass on Kansas Lane. At one point, I don't know what came first, the little plane outside or the helicopter. That was the first part of, well, something's happening there. But it kind of just trickled along, and then it was like there was like a major infusion. I don't know if it was capital or community involvement, but there was like a moment where things really took a different turn, and there was investment that was happening in that. There was a lot more community awareness of the museum. Talk to me a little bit about that. Do you know kind of what I'm talking about with that, where it's just like y'all are rocking along, but something happened, and it's like now we kind of are going to the next step?
Well, I think it was people just started realizing the importance of what we had, and we worked really, really hard sending letters to churches and different organizations to invite them to come to the museum. It's funny because once you get people inside the museum, they're overwhelmed.
Right.
And I think it was because more and more people started coming out there. We started trying to have more events and more social engagements out there that got people interested. If you could just get them in the front door, then you get support, because they realize, and when they walk back, I can't tell you how many people, after you get past the first room and when you go look down that hall, and they're like, "Wow." And we hear that all the time. And if I had a dime for everybody that said, "I never dreamed it was this big," we could add on today. So I think it was that, just the realization of how we were totally dependent then upon the community. And back in the day, in 2008, 9, 10, that time, it was a little easier to reach people. I tell the people now that work for us, I said, during that time, I had 2 newspapers and 2 TV stations, and they were great to us.
Right.
And that made a huge difference. We really had, in fact, both the News Star and the TV station said, look, no more stories on the museum for a while. So, because they did so many, but they were really, really good to us. And so I think that was one of the reasons that we were able to continue on. And then we decided to do corporate memberships and get corporations to get involved rather than just private memberships that started only $25 a year. The corporate memberships start at $500 a year.
Right.
So that was really, I think, just putting our heads together, the board working to try to decide how we could continue to get more money, and then telling people, inviting them to the museum and saying, look, if you don't support this, we're going to have to close the doors.
Right.
And then more and more the people, like our aircraft restoration team, they started finding these airplanes. They wanted to restore. Everybody loves an airplane, right?
So let's start from the beginning of that. So there was no real airplane restoration that was out there initially. So you've got the artifacts inside. Tell me how the aircraft restoration got started. What was the genesis of that?
Okay, Jerry Smith, who was one of the original founders of the museum, who has a love for veterans and a heart of gold. His passion was the airplanes. He had been in the military also during the Vietnam War, and he was able to get that first Loach helicopter that's on the stand there. A lot of people don't understand the significance of that Loach. They're very rare, believe it or not. That Loach helicopter, when you pass by, during Vietnam, it was used kind of like a decoy would be.
Okay.
The Loach would fly low over the jungles of Vietnam, and it would draw the fire. And then it had a very high acceleration speed. It would take off, and that's when the Hueys and later the Cobras would come in, and they were able to identify where the Viet Cong were. So we were able to get that, and then Jerry started realizing the importance of maybe getting more aircraft. And so slowly, we just started getting more airplanes. And then we were able in 2010, with the help of the state at that time, to be able to build that restoration building that we have back there, because the men would say, we can't work today because it's too hot. We can't work because it's raining. So then we were able to bring the airplanes inside and give them more work time to work on the airplanes. So it was just an evolution of it, and we're really proud of where we are today, because not only our new mantra is we're more than a museum, because what has evolved with some of our veterans programs is very significant right now. We started doing, in 2010, I went to Washington, D.C. and partnered with the Library of Congress. So we do veterans oral histories there. And we videotape a veteran telling their story of service, and I don't care if they wrote checks, they didn't have to be in a war, and it is their story, whatever they want to tell. So we videotape them telling their story, and then we actually give them 2 DVDs for free to thank them for giving us their story. We then send one to Washington, D.C. to the Library of Congress. It becomes part of the Library of Congress database. And so in future years, family members can type in here and see them tell their story. It's really a great program. So we've been doing that for a very long time. Jerry had already started working with the veterans on some of their stories, but this took that to the next level. And about 2012, Dr. Mitch Young, who was a Vietnam veteran, who was PTSD sufferer himself, retired from the university, and he started looking for a place to do his PTSD groups outside of the university. And he called me. We'd had the Vietnam Wall there 3 times, and wanted to know if they could use that for a meeting place. So we still do PTSD clinics twice a month for combat veterans.
So how many, going back to doing a little bit of research before we sat down and talked, I went on the website, and number one, the website's first class.
Thank you.
It is really nice. You mentioned that we're more than a museum, and right off the bat, I got that. I'm like, I didn't know y'all offered all these services to veterans that are out there. So it's not just a museum. It's a fixture within our community. There's a lot of community support for our veterans that comes through that museum. So how is that possible? Is it just through...
It's free.
Yeah, well, I know it is, and that was something that you had mentioned a little earlier about you really wanted to fight to keep it free, and that's very prominent on the website that you pay nothing to come in here, and
You know why? Because kids aren't taught history anymore.
they're
I mean,
not.
you've got children, you realize that. Every school group that comes through there, if I'm there and I have the opportunity to speak to them, I do, and I become more and more aware of how they don't appreciate history. But what we have in that museum, the enlightenment, when they walk through the museum, they see these uniforms, they read these stories if they want to, but if not, they're just inspired by the way the exhibits are set up. And they start realizing maybe there was a price paid for our freedom.
Sure.
I don't ever want a man, woman, or child to ever say, I can't afford to go there. As many times as they want to come. I mean, it's always free, and they can come whenever they want. They can bring as many people as they want. During the museum open hours, we encourage groups that are free. If they're after hours, we have to charge because
Sure.
we have to have staff there. But that's the reason. And then not only that, one of the things, the third veterans program that we do, we have the General Claire Chennault, Chapter 51 of the Disabled American Veterans Association. They service veterans' claims of service there. And our service officer, Michael Shaw, started it. He, and now he's got help with that, have been able to get almost $3 million worth of additional benefits
Wow.
for local veterans annually.
Wow.
So we are giving $3 million, basically, so to speak, back into our community.
That's
Which
impressive.
it is, and I'm extremely proud of that. And last year we did a campaign, a fundraising campaign, which we were overwhelmed at the response. The DAV had a grant that if we came up with half the money, they would supply half the money to buy a brand new van. And we do van service now from the museum, or we pick them up, to Jackson, Mississippi, to the VA hospital. And they stop in the smaller communities if they need to, Rayville, Tallulah, Delhi, and all those little communities, to take them to the hospital in Jackson for checkups, for procedures, for whatever they need.
That's impressive. You know, you talked about history, and in our country, you know, it's a lot of movements of trying to cancel a lot of what has happened within our history, and it's really sad. I know that there's things that have happened in our history that nobody's really proud of. Nobody, the black eyes that may have happened within our country's history, but it's still history. We need to be able to learn from the good, the bad that's happened in society. I want my kids to understand what it means to live in a free society and the cost that it took to get there for that society.
You know, I have such a problem. It's funny because we have a lot of Chinese that come to the museum, and the Chinese are like, you Americans, your history's not 300 years old, and you're destroying all your statues.
Yeah.
What if we did away with the Great Wall? I mean, you know, nobody's perfect.
Sure.
And we have to realize that unless you lived during that time, you know, people lived within their time. And we all do things because that's the way things are done during our time. People are going to look back and see things you and I did wrong.
Sure.
But like you just said, it doesn't negate the good and the contributions you make for
Absolutely.
the better of our country. And the fact that patriotism isn't necessarily PC anymore. You know, I've had the honor and privilege of traveling to China and even Moscow, Russia, as a guest because of the museum. We're founding members of the International World War II Museum Association.
Okay.
I have felt more patriotism in China and Russia sometimes than you can even feel here in the United States, you know, and it's not put on. The Chinese people love their country. They may not always agree with what the people are doing, but they love their country, and they don't mind being true to their country. I was part of a million-man march in Moscow on VE Day. Most Americans really don't even know what VE Day stands for, Victory Over Europe,
Right.
May 8th. And in Russia, they celebrate on May 9th. They give me a big picture of my grandfather to carry in this parade, and everybody's singing patriotic songs. Why can't we do that here?
Well, I can tell you that if I can offer a little bit of hope. My wife and I, over spring break, we got to go to Washington, D.C., and it's my first time to be able to go. And we were out there on the mall, beautiful weather. We got to see the cherry blossoms. And the thing, probably one of my biggest takeaways from that trip was out on the National Mall, viewing all of the monuments. We saw every possible nationality we could see. People speaking all sorts of languages we didn't understand, all different races of people that were out there. And patriotism is alive and well. I think we get caught up a lot of times in what the media wants to feed us about
Right.
what's happening in our country. But I was so inspired at just the people that did not look like me that were out there, that were proud to be Americans, or they were proud to be in a place where freedom reigns.
Right.
So that really inspired me on that trip. So at the museum, you've got a board of directors, obviously, to be able to run things. But it sounds as if you've got a series of volunteers, and more than just a series of a large group of volunteers that help make a lot of this possible. So talk to me a little bit about kind of the different types of volunteers that you have that give back to the museum and to the...
We have about 20 volunteers that are involved with restoring the airplanes. And they Tuesdays and Fridays are their days to work, and they pull them. And they've done it. You've seen them out there in the yard, and then they restore them. They have restored them to their natural beauty. That's why we're trying to do the Chennault Park now, to be able to give them some cover, because a lot of them are getting dulled by the elements. And so to give them a little cover would slow that down. So we have about 20 men. Unfortunately, they're getting older. We really need some new blood. I wish we could inspire some of the younger people, or maybe not even younger people, but people maybe under 80. To be able to come be a part of that.
Right.
It's a fun thing to do, and everybody has, everybody can hold a paintbrush or sand an airplane, and there's something anybody can do. We've been very fortunate in the last couple of years. We've had some young people, like high schoolers,
Okay.
that have come to help. One in particular I'm thinking of, he is there every day they're not in school. He is at the museum trying to help out, and he'll do anything we ask him to do. And then we have a college student that comes and helps us out we do have, and you're right, we are fortunate at the museum because we work, the National Guard unit's not very far from us.
Right.
And we work with them, and they are our inspiration. So we do realize, and we get to hear the stories when they come in, the younger people. And I have met just probably a handful of people of the hundreds and probably thousands of veterans that I've met. Only a handful said they wouldn't do it again, but I have met veterans without arms, legs, blind, that would tell me I would do it all over again. So I do get to see that good side. I just wish everybody could, and everybody could understand the price that has been paid for our freedoms that we enjoy. Every group I get in, because I've been to China several times, I will tell them I've never met a man, woman, or child in mainland China that would not give anything to have the freedoms that we have. And that I've met some high-ranking officers that ended up in jail because Xi Jinping, they didn't agree with him. We don't have to fear that in this country. We are able to say what we want to. So we just really need a new appreciation of our freedom. We should have that maybe with all the immigrants trying to get here.
Sure.
We should realize that we have something everybody wants. I don't know
I
what
think
it'll
we
take.
have it too good sometimes to really appreciate what we really have. When we talk community, I know you just briefly mentioned before we started this that you were coming back from El Dorado area.
Crossett.
Crossett.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to assume that you were possibly doing business on behalf of the museum. So when we talk community, we're not just talking Monroe, Louisiana. This is a treasure that covers our region. So tell me a little bit about that, the support or the interaction throughout the region that you have for the museum.
It was really interesting. I met a man at the luncheon today. He came up to me after I finished my talk, and he said, I've been a member of the museum for many years. He's a Korean veteran. And I said, well, thank you. And he said, but I've never been to the museum. I said, well, aren't you glad now you know what you're supporting? So because we do the oral histories, and I said, well, if you haven't been to the museum, let me schedule you an appointment to do an oral history for us, and then you can come do that and see the museum. And we have a wonderful man who records our histories for us. His name is James Rambin, volunteer, veteran himself, and before I left Crossett, I sent him the man's name and number. Before I hit Monroe, James texted me back. I've already talked to him, got him scheduled. So that is how we work. I mean, we get excited about it there.
Wow,
Give
yeah.
us your story, and we're excited. So, and he's going to get to see the museum. So I think that there are people across the country. We're fixing to have an air show. Mm-hmm. And May 5th, 6th, and 7th, we had the first one last June, first one that had been in Monroe since the 70s.
Wow, and we went to that, and
It was
you
hot.
guys, it was hot. You guys did an amazing job. I've been to the Barksdale Air Force Show several times. Mm-hmm. It wasn't quite as grand as that, but it was just as good of an experience. And it was in our hometown, and it was a quality air show. It was hot. Nothing you guys could have done with that, but
we moved it
nice.
up. Yeah, we moved it up. It's in May this year. You're right, it was. And I heard people who told me, even I've had people tell me they like it better than Barksdale because you feel so much more up close and personal.
It was much more intimate.
Yeah.
Now, I did regret not going to the evening one after I saw all the photographs right at sunset was happening. So
this year we've got a good surprise.
Oh, do you?
Yes, we do.
So how many shows are going to happen?
This year it's going to be 3.
Okay.
And Friday and Saturday are both twilight shows.
Okay.
Gates open at 3, and I hope people will come at 3 because before the actual show starts around 5-ish, 5:30, we have a radio control team that's going to be doing a show themselves.
Okay, good.
They even have a radio control jet.
Wow.
That they're going to be flying. Now, I haven't seen it, and I can't wait to see that. But the last plane to fly on Friday and Saturday evening will be one that shoots pyro off of it and lights
awesome.
and things. So we're really excited about that. And then on Sunday, the gates open at noon, and it'll probably last until about 5. So it's going to be, we have 13 acts. They laugh at me because I have to tell one particular act that I can't wait to see. We're going to have an airplane that flies upside down about 18 feet over the tarmac and cut a ribbon with its prop and then land on a pickup truck.
Oh, goodness. They got more tenacity than what I do to make that happen.
My son, who came to the last show, he told me, I don't know if you saw the Red Bull racer that did all the spiraling. He told me, he said, I got nauseated watching him. He will be back.
But it's just good fun. I mean, it's how many communities can say that they have something of that quality's coming to?
It is. We have an A-10 Warthog. And if you know anything about planes, they even seem more excited about the Warthog than they did the F-16 that flew last year. And by the way, the Warthog is flown by a woman whose call sign is MAD.
Okay.
And our F-16 last year, for the very first time, was flown by a woman. Her call sign was Rebel. So we can really kind of put that in there. The ladies are taking over. But, we really are excited about it. We have food trucks. We have activities for kids. We have a kids zone. The Marines and the Air Force are both bringing simulator trucks for free. You'll get to go in and do simulators inside those trucks. They're huge trucks that they're bringing in. So we have something really for all ages. So it's going to be great. And it's Cinco de Mayo.
Okay, go figure, right? So if somebody wants to learn more about the Museum and Aviation Park, how do they find out? What is the website that they could go to?
Well, ChennaultMuseum.org.
Okay.
And, we really have all of it on there. Like every other website, you kind of have to navigate it.
Yeah, but it's a nice website. I was impressed.
We've worked hard to get a nice website. We have a couple of people on our board that know how to do it right.
Well, they did it right.
Yeah.
It looks really good,
Well,
easy to navigate.
Yeah, we have somebody in Shreveport that kind of manages it, but they check it out and make suggestions. And, we wish we had time trying to make it even better, but we have 3 full-time employees only, and between events and running the museum and field trips and schools.
Sure.
And, we really kind of utilize everybody we have to the nth degree.
for support, how can somebody help you? If
Well-
there's one thing, if we could have one takeaway from this talk, what's the one thing? What's the biggest need?
Be a member.
Be a member.
Be a member. I've been there 15 years as director. Been with it. That seems like a long time. It is. It has been my goal. We only have around 1,000 members. We are losing a lot of our members because they were the World War II era, and they felt very loyal to us,
Sure.
and a lot of our income came from them. And we're losing that. We need to get the younger people, younger generation. Our membership started $25 a year.
Okay.
And we're free to get in. Of course, we want more. You can become, it goes up to $500. So any level you want to come in at. And then we do have people, we have private donations, but if they want to really help us, be a member, be supportive, turn out for the events. It's really interesting because last year we had around 17,000 people at the air show. 32% of our online tickets were from out of state. We had people from
Wow.
Washington State coming, California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania.
But that's
big
also
group.
a testament to the quality of show you guys put
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
and it exceeded my expectations. I mean, Monroe, Louisiana, we're not a big city. I didn't expect anything major to happen, and it well exceeded my expectations.
Last year we really got kind of tickled because for 2 or 3 months when we started really advertising the air show, a lot of people didn't know what an air show was. They
Really?
thought we were going to have a few airplanes they could look at. Most of them would say, "Is it going to be here?" And we're like, "No, that jet can't take off down this road. It's got to have an airport." It's a massive area at the airport, as you realized if you were there last year, that people aren't aware of, besides where just the planes take off. It's a massive square footage they have down there for us to have a lot of activities going on. And even the food trucks, we're having a little trouble getting food trucks because some people they don't have the staff to staff them. Johnny's Pizza made almost $10,000 profit in 2 days last year.
Wow.
There, so it's a great opportunity for local restaurants and things to really do well over a weekend. And so, but staffing seems to be kind of a problem. So if anybody knows people that have a food truck or want to come flip some burgers and set up or something, I think we have some opportunities. We actually signed up yesterday a bacon truck. I've seen them on TV when they go to the big state fairs. Everything's wrapped in bacon. They have a bacon hot dog. They have bacon jalapenos. They have
that's
bacon
you're
this.
talking my language now. I mean, how can you go wrong if it's wrapped in bacon?
That's right.
But you bring up an interesting question that I had that I forgot to ask. How many visitors do you have come through the museum? Do y'all track that?
Oh, definitely. We track that because it's very important with grants.
Okay.
We have expanded it to track also our social media because obviously during COVID our numbers dropped. We were averaging close to about 20,000 before COVID.
Okay.
We have not reached back those numbers yet because people are still a little bit leery of coming. Last month we had a little over 1,000. So,
Okay.
actual visitations. We had about a 4,000 or 5,000 footprint with social media. That's another thing. Our air show last year at this time, we had about a 60,000 footprint in social media. Right now we're over 300,000.
Wow.
So there are people that we're expecting a really big show this year.
How many people came to the air show last year?
About 17,000.
17,000.
And the city is so wonderful. They're our biggest sponsor. And
The shuttles they had.
the shuttles, yes. I was going to bring that up.
Did not anticipate that, but especially, we hoofed it in going in, but we were so exhausted that heat coming out in those shuttles. They had the AC blowing and took you right to your vehicle.
And they will pick you up.
Well organized. I think our city is on the move. We're doing something great, both sides of the river. And I'm proud to say that your organization, our community, makes it better.
Thank you.
And I hope you guys continue investing. And I'll make a commitment to you. My family will become a member.
Thank you.
So we can't have an expectation for growth if we're not willing to put
Yeah.
our yes on the table. So for my community, my yes is on the table, and if you need, my family will.
ChennaultMuseum.org and become a member.
Okay, I've talked to my wife about it today. She's like, Brian, what are you committing us to? But no, we will. We'll jump in with both feet because, the reason for starting this podcast is I want people to have the same appreciation for my community as I do. There is so much we have to offer, and you guys are a big part of that. So
thank you, John. And can I say one little thing in recommendation for our community? A few years ago, and it's funny because we've talked to other cities and we're doing something a little different. All of our attractions, we get along really well. We all feel like, that we add something, a different component. And we have a lot of attractions here.
We do.
We have about 7 or 8 big ones. And we have a meeting now. We have kind of formed an organization of directors from all these different attractions. We get together, we look at each other's calendars and try to coordinate and not do double dips on the weekends.
I had no idea y'all did that.
We do. And, when we mention it to other cities, they're very surprised. And we don't feel that much competition because we all add a different element.
Absolutely. You're not in competition with anybody. The more people that you're able to attract to the event is going to help the next event down the road.
Right.
So, well, look, thank you for all that you do. The organization, the museum, the air park, it's a vital part of our community. And just give your people a high five when you get back.
Well, thank you so much.
We know it's not just one person making it happen.
Not at all.
It's very apparent the growth that you guys have had, and I appreciate it. So thanks for coming and doing this with me. It means a lot to me.
Means a lot to me, too. Thank you so much.
All right. Welcome to the 318 Experience, the ultimate podcast for discovering the best of what our community has to offer. I'm Brian Bendily, your host and local realtor, with a passion for showcasing the people, attractions, and hidden treasures of Monroe, West Monroe, and beyond.